Go.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Get Tied On. I'm Tom Amello. He's Michael Kipnis, the Wizard. This is our second season. We're delighted to be back. Like poltergeists, they're back. And we plan once again to bring to you guests, interviews with folks who have made their living in their lives on the racetrack, many of whom have not been interviewed before, and we're proud to do that. And also to provide the best information we can about racing at Saratoga during the meet, trip horses, and wagering as well. So, Michael, here we are. It's the Monday before opening day, and we're back at it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our second season. You know, a lot of people would come over to me or email me and tell me, you know, what a great group of guests we had. They don't know a lot about racing, but we had different interviews that gave you a different slice of the racing industry. And, you know, people that, like you said, never get interviewed, never get recognized. We don't need the big name guys, you know, because they get interviewed all the time. You know, we want the ones that, like, the ones that I remember, the saddling the horses. What was his name?
Harry Rice.
Harry Rice. Harry Rice. Yeah, Harry Rice. We had a jockey agent. We had a trainer. We had a rider.
A couple of trainers.
The Junior Alvarado.
Yep.
We had just a great tapestry of guests that make up this industry.
Yep. And they told their stories, and we're going to give an equal number of folks an opportunity to do that this summer. We'd be remiss if we didn't start off with the fact that there was Belmont at Saratoga this year, Michael, and so there was tremendous hype, tremendous interest. It was a tremendous 4 days. In spite of what the weather guys predicted, we got away without the real monsoons for 3 days. Some of the upstate folks were a little concerned about, you know, the changes that NYRA had made, because they basically lifted the template that was Belmont at New York and overlaid it over Saratoga. And it was in many ways different from a regular Saratoga meet. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that was the reality that everyone had to deal with here in Saratoga.
Yeah, I mean, they made we walked into the track today and I saw for the first time the changes that were made. And, you know, I saw big new TV sets. There's new bars.
The new Jim Dandy, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so they're trying to improve it, you know, improve the facility. But the racing is now going to be 40 days. And it's going to be a little different than the 4 days we saw in June.
Oh, absolutely. The 4 days in June were reminiscent of the 24-day meet that we all enjoyed, when it was compact and every day was crowded and almost every card was exciting. That's what the 4 days of Belmont at Saratoga did. You know, weekend racing, Friday, Saturday racing is better than anywhere in the world during the Saratoga meet. And, you know, folks are complaining, but if it says Saratoga, folks are wagering on it. And Handle has been terrific with this product.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be they're going to have to fill a lot of races with, you know, maiden claimers, cheap claiming races. It's, you know, it's not like the 5-day week when it was 4 weeks.
Right.
And it's just a different product, but it's Saratoga.
Absolutely.
And you know, it's every time you pick up the racing form, it's 9, 10, or 11 new puzzles to solve. And it's our job, you know, to pick winners, to do the best we can to cash some tickets. And, you know, it is what it is. We just have to deal with, you know, my hope is that the field size is in general, at least decent enough, not small 4 and 5 horse field
Right.
where you can't even bet the race, where there's a lot of very, very short price horses in the race. And I hope the weather holds up because these off the turf, but the trainers are getting smarter by entering more horses on the main track onlys in these turf races.
Right.
And with the hopes that the field size, even if they take the races off the turf, they're not too small.
The only thing I would like to see is that main track only horses are drawn into the full body of the race rather than drawn last and placed in the farthest outside posts.
Right. Yeah.
Some tracks do that.
Yeah. I mean, we just
It is what it is.
we
No.
take it the way it comes. I'm not going to complain about it. You know, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to just be, you know, the challenge of Saratoga. You know, look, it's us against the Mutual Board. And so it is. I don't want to complain. I just want to play what the hands that they deal us.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of this segment, and we'll be back with the winner's circle and our first guest. So stay with us.
Welcome back to Get Tied On. I'd be remiss and I'm apologetic that you weren't my first guest last year because the show is named after you. So after a whole season went by, I'm like laying in bed one day in the dead of winter and saying I never had Bob Duncan on, who I named the show Get Tied On after. So I made a mental note that this time I wasn't going to forget to have you on as my first guest. So welcome to the show, Bobby.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
So we're both racetrackers. You know, I grew up in New York City. You grew up in Elmont.
Yes.
Right outside the doors of Belmont Park.
Yeah.
And you really, like me, were going to the racetrack, sneaking to the racetrack, cutting school, doing all the things we did as a kid to be at the racetrack.
Yeah.
And I mean, did you go back as far, because your father was a trainer?
Yes.
And did you hang with him as a child?
My first experience with my dad was I think I was 10 years old. I had been traipsing behind him, trying to keep up with him, trying to take the big steps. We didn't even have a car. He didn't have a driver's license, by the way.
Okay.
And
so how far was your house from the track?
As the crow flies, and that's how we did it, because there's bent bars in the fence, or you'd climb over the gate that's locked all the time. That was our way, and it was directly to on 34 called the Hollow, the corner by the police station.
Okay.
And we'd walk over there, and the summer came around, and I was able to walk some horses, and I was able to take care of the pony. And my father said, "But look, if you work through the summer for me, I'll get you a bicycle at the end of the summer." And so that's what I did. And that was my first paying job. Going on 10, I didn't turn 10 till October.
Now, he had to be fairly successful because he trained for Art Rooney, the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And by the way, the Pittsburgh Steelers is my favorite sports team.
My whole family is indoctrinated. We had Pittsburgh Steelers napkins on, when they were kids.
Well, if you go into my apartment, we have dish rags that are the rags of the Steelers that they
terrible towel.
Terrible towel.
Yeah, I've got one.
So those are my kitchen towels.
Yeah.
And then if you go into my office, one of my prized possessions is a signed Mean Joe Green helmet that he wore. So that's Jack Lambert, Stallworth, Bradshaw.
Followed them.
Yeah, that was both of our teams growing up. And did Rooney give you tickets? Did he get to go to games?
I had a wonderful experience with Mr. Rooney as a young child, because he'd call usually around 6 o'clock, and this is about the same age when I started working for my father. And I'd sit in the room where I knew I could get to the phone before my father could, because I knew if I picked it up, Mr. Rooney talked to me for a while. And he was just like talking to your uncle or something. He'd give you the time. Couldn't have been any nicer about it. And then on occasion, he'd send me something like a banner, the old banner with the Steeler guy in the bib overalls and the hard cap. He sent me one of those, and he sent me a autograph ball, and he just always just was so good to us. And then there was one day in particular that we're sitting home, and it was a Sunday, and let me get this straight now. I really don't know what day it was, but all of a sudden a limo pulls up in front of our house. Now our house, my grandfather built it back at the turn of the century. It was in pretty rough shape. We had 4 or 5 families living in it from back through the Depression. It was with it. And Mr. Rooney comes in the front door, walks right in like we all did. Nobody had a key to the house. Walks back in. He said, "I just came over to see Gertie. That's my mother." And like we're at shocked. It's like having the Pope walk in your house.
Yeah.
And but once again, that's Mr. Rooney. And there were times he would let me sit on the bench one time at the Yankee Stadium when they were playing the Giants. Of course, we were never beating anybody back then, but
Right,
I was
right.
sat on the bench with the team. And then there was another time where he got us tickets to the championship game between the Green Bay Packers and us, and the Green Bay Packers and the Giants. And that was a game where everybody was freezing their tail off. I mean, it was really a very cold winter
I
day.
remember those days because I
Yeah.
went to a Buffalo Bills game at Shea Stadium,
And
and
yeah,
it was one of those. It was the day that O.J. Simpson rushed for like 230 yards, and it was
yeah,
-degrees, and it was wind. It was crazy that you
yeah,
could sit there for 2.5
yeah.
hours. But there was no. I think of all of sports, no matter what sport, Art Rooney is one of the greatest owners of all time. You know, if you look at how he runs his organization, there's been 3 coaches in
Yeah.
40 years.
It's an amazing thing.
That
Yeah.
doesn't exist now. He's
Yeah.
as loyal as they come. He's patient, and
And
you
it's
know,
instilled into players. You can see the way they reacted. They have that standard.
it's a real culture.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know when you were when I was 14, I was living in New York City, and I was living, in rat holes apartments, right? But when you were 14, you snuck to Saratoga, and if I understand, I know the
told you that?
guy. He's a one-legged alcoholic. Is that right?
Who told you that?
I know. Believe me. I'm a member of the CIA. I get
No,
so well. I forget his name, but he's a one. We was like, and you lived in his apartment.
No, so it was one of the places on the track, the rooms on the track.
Right,
And
right.
there were 2 guys living in it when I got there. This is for Monty Parks. He was the trainer.
Right.
And there was a one-legged guy was a groom, and it was a wino was Jerry, the guy. And
I supplied him the wine. I want you to.
it was it was an interesting thing. I got on the Ebert van.
Right.
Charlie Ebert was a friend of my father's. I knew that, and I knew he'd tell him. But I didn't tell anybody I was doing it. I just went up to Great Eastern Mills at the time, $20, bought a cot, put it under my arm, and had a backpack, and I said, "I'm going to go to Saratoga for the month."
Right. And you lived with the
Like a guy in the wino. Then the wino, I wound up knowing for years later, while I was on the starting gig, he'd be at the racetrack and stop in and visit with it.
Well, I know the guy because
Do you really?
yeah, because he limped into Saratoga one day with a bottle of wine, and he was talking to Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons, not Sonny Jim Fitzsimmons, Major Odom.
Oh yeah,
Major
Odom.
Odom. And I don't know what the heck Major Odom was talking to him about, but
He was a character.
he was,
Yeah.
he was.
That is
So-
funny.
So now, you're part of the racetrack. You work as an assistant for your dad, or you work, you've
Yeah,
done
I was
everything.
rubbing horses.
Right, right.
More mucking than
And-
rubbing, by the way.
And then at some point, you decide you need money and you want to become a model, right? I mean,
Well, that's a big jump forward.
Yeah.
The first thing that happened is, which to me was a big step, is that I'll give you a brief beginning of the story. When I was 14 or 15, so I don't remember, it was in the fall of the year, my dad ran a $3,500 claim, the last race of the day at Aqueduct. Our horse gets claimed, and we're standing around getting ready to leave, and Eddie Nealoy comes walking down from the race secretary's office, and he says to my father, he said, "Bob," he said, "look, I just claimed the horse, and I didn't bring anybody over. I just did it off the top of my head, but I got nobody to take the horse home. Do you have anybody with you?" He said, "Yeah, I'd take him. I'm 14 years old, and it's Eddie Nealoy who trains Gunbo, and they're down in the big barn down that we know all about him." And so I took that horse home for him, and coincidentally, a couple of years later, after the trip to Saratoga, I got a call from someone, it was John Campo actually, who was his
Who
assistant
worked
at the time,
for
and
Eddie Nealoy.
he said, yeah, we've just added the overflow barn. He was training the Phipps horses by then. We've got the overflow barn filled. Do you want to rub horses for us? You know, even if it's just for the summer, because by then I was in college. And I said, oh yeah, yeah. So I go there, and I'm going to make this short for you because it could go on all day. But one of the horses I had was a 3-year-old filly named Marking Time. She wound up winning the Acorn. Now I've never touched anything more than the $3,500 horse, and here I am rubbing a stake horse. But pretty much everybody in the barn had a stake horse. So now we get further to Saratoga. There's a kerfuffle in Saratoga about a guy that was rubbing a 2-year-old colt. He wasn't showing up for work. They fired him. They give me the horse. That horse was Successor. Successor wound up winning the Champagne and was 2-year-old colt of the year. Once again, you know, you just, the doors open up and things happen. And on top of that, here's a classic thing to me. We were moved over to the big barn because we had Successor, and my horses were between Patty Cleary, who had Queen Empress, who was one of the eligible handicap horses. On this side of me was Buck Passer. So every other day, I got to go into Buck Passer's stall and fix the mud thing. He had a mud thing because he had the bad feet, the quarter crack, and I couldn't wait for the day that I was going to go over there because I'm touching Buck Passer. And it was just a wonderful opportunity, and the whole flow of the barn, and you know, the quality of it, and then the Sunday afternoons when the Phipps family would come out and sit in chairs and Mr. Nealoy would parade them. It was just such an exciting time for me. I couldn't believe my luck.
So where'd the modeling come in? At what stage of like?
Yeah, I was well into the starting gate thing. 1980. I was separated. We weren't divorced till 85, but I wound up having a girlfriend in the city, and she was a model and she did clothing too, you know, where they measure you, and she
Right.
did shoes, and she had a pretty good business going on for herself. And she said, "Come take a walk with me. I've got to go over to Gilda Roos." That was her modeling agency, to pick up a check. So I get over there, and I'm standing, and I don't know if she did it on purpose or not, but we're in the office, and one of the girls at the desk looks up and said, have you ever done any modeling? I said, no, you know, no. Said, were you interested? I said, what's it entail? And she said, well, no, we get, you know, people call for models to do things, you know, some stock photos is one of the things. So she arranged for us to go on a call together. It was Pat, my girlfriend at the time, myself, and I hustled my nephew to go with us too. And we wound up taking some pictures, got paid, used those pictures to get a composite, and started going around making rounds. And for me, it was fun. You know, I was no blood money in it, and the guys you're dealing with are hustling and trying to make it. And the thing about it, the difference at the time was from working on the track, I was tan, blonde hair, and that was sort of the in thing at the time. And I started picking up work. First thing was like Prince Rackets, and then somewhere down the road, I got a call for the I forgot, Vantage cigarettes.
Was that Marlboro?
No, everybody thinks it's
Oh,
Marlboro.
so it's Vantage cigarettes.
It's Vantage, but everybody thinks it's Marlboro.
Yeah, like
because I have pictures with the horses. You know, it was one of the things I had in the book.
Right.
So everybody says, "Oh, the Marlboro."
Were you working at the racetrack while you were doing
Yeah,
this? So
yeah,
just a side gig.
Yeah, and I had 2 days off. It happened to be the dock day was Tuesday, and we had to take a second day. I had Wednesday, and they were good days to be in town and go on calls.
So you end up meeting Marshall, not Marshall, Cassidy, the gate, who ran the gate, right? George Cassidy.
Yeah, he was my boss. He was
That,
first man.
so that was your first.
Yeah, Dr. Gilman told him about me because Gilman was in the barn all the time with Buck Passer and whatnot, and I was next door. And they needed a guy because one of their regular guys was going to go be the starter in Finger Lakes for this season. And I got a call one Sunday while we're watching sports, and it was Dr. Gilman calling for Mr. Cassidy. Asked if I wanted to do it. They would do it. I think this is the most exciting thing I've ever heard of. I can be in there with these horses and the races, and I was 19.
You were 19 when you started with George
8,
Cassidy.
my birthday falls right after the Saratoga meet. October 2nd, so it might have been 18. But went out there the first day, and looking at it. I said, it smells different. It looks different. I said, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm going to concentrate on everything I see. And I'm going to put every horse in the gate I can if they'll let me. And back then it was sort of like the old Navy thing they say to teach you to swim, they throw you in the water. That first horse come up, I said, can I take that one? And Frank Alvarez was there. He said, yeah, go ahead. He's all right. And from that day on, they kept me busy. And Frank was my mentor. He was the guy that was handling all the good horses. And I followed him around, and he taught me, and mostly he taught me to be a grown up. He taught, you know, I couldn't be an 18-year-old out there. You had to be a man. He used that all the time on, you know, you're showing up for work, you're 5 minutes late, you could be 5 minutes early. He coached me, and I got a great fatherly advice from him throughout my career. Still alive, by the way.
How many years did you work for Cassidy before you actually got the job as the head starter? Like, how did that happen?
It's mostly through attrition. I was 2 years part-time, got drafted into the military, and so it was not till 1970 that I was working steadily for him. As you said, 93, it took quite a while to get there. There was a time where he was letting me start. He was letting me start. It's a good thing to tell you this story too. He'd want to go home early sometimes. He had a very nice Mercedes, and if it started to rain or something, he'd want to get home early, and whoever was in charge, he'd have them take this last start, and he'd drive home. I mean, he was a very powerful man in the business. He was close to the Alfred Vanderbilt and the upper echelons. And so one time I was in charge on the ground. He says, Bob, I'm going home. And I look up, and it's a 10-horse field up in the chute. And I'm thinking, it's the first time I'm ever going to do this. And so I took this start, and it went fine. The next time this happened, it was Frank Calvary's, and it was a 6.5 race. And we've got the stand that's on wheels, you know, where they put it out super early, and they have a maintenance man holding it in place so it doesn't fall over.
That's where you step up on.
Yeah, you're about 10 feet, 8 feet maybe under your feet.
And and the starter is holding a button,
yeah,
right?
And you have a PA system, a mic.
Okay, so you work for him for several years. You
Yes.
work your way up
Yeah.
to becoming the head
Yeah.
starter. Now, if there's 12 horses in a race, a full field, are there 12 people that are manning each gate?
Back then, no. We had 8 guys.
8 guys would handle a full gate of.
Well, you do what you could. You know, you can double up and give a little help to the offside horse. But that went on for quite a few years. We gradually got up to 10. We'd always put a couple of guys on when we got to Saratoga. Let me give you one quick answer, by the
Sure.
way. While I was in the gate that time, the last time, I take the start,
Right.
break, the horses go out of the front of the gate. The inside horse hangs a left, and he's heading right toward the starter stand. And the guy that's holding the stand runs, ducks under the rail. The horse hits the rail, and my stand's going like this. And have you ever seen the F Troop?
Right.
The opening scene where they shoot the cannon, and that was what this felt like. It was like a slow motion thing, and over we went. Well, they wound up using that for about a year in sports bloopers.
So you become the head starter. You work all these years. You work up the ranks, right?
Yes.
And then you meet Monty Roberts, right? At some point, right?
Yeah.
And Monty Roberts was known as the Horse Whisperer.
Right.
Explain like what that relationship, because you basically, from what I understand, horses were not treated the same pre you, loading and getting, getting 2-year-olds ready.
Yeah.
You met Monty Roberts,
Yeah.
the Horse Whisperer, and you changed the whole philosophy of the whole preparation of getting horses ready to race.
Yeah.
Explain that.
As I was working, I told you I started paying attention right away, and I started picking up things I thought we could change. Some of them were mechanical, like the backup bar. I just looked at it and then figured, we decided that it's no help. It's just
What's a backup bar?
it's the same thing as your, like in a human race. If you the apparatus you put your feet in to get a good start to
Okay.
push. By putting this bar down, it had some weight that had a kind of a hook on, not a hook, but a bent side, and it would bite into the cushion. And the thought was that if you set the horse up right, when they slip, they'll catch that bar and they won't slip out so badly that they stumble. Problem was horses often tripped going into it. Sometimes they would back out and trip over it. Sometimes their feet just weren't in line with it, and it really wasn't the benefit everybody thought it was. So one time I was starting the race, and I said, "That's it. We're not going to use them, and we'll see how we do." And we just started in the morning practice without it, and it just was fine. I didn't know that if you could add a little water to the track, that's pretty much the best thing you can do for it, to give traction, give it a little substance. So that was the start of one thing, and there were a series of those things that went on. But the other main thing that happened was we decided to quit treating the horses like a number. And because what would happen when you first got there and you're teaching a baby, they say, well, the first thing you have to do is walk them through 3 times, and then when that works well, you can walk them in and we'll close the back doors. And it was all by the numbers. And I said, well, let's slow it down. First of all, we're not in a rush. This is the morning. Let's slow it down and give the horse the chance to learn these things. And if it takes a few more visits, we'll do it. And we found that by slowing the energy down in the morning, the horses were more thoughtful. There was less of that fight or flight thing in where they were going to the gate and being hazed to get in a hurry, and they're thinking they'd like to be anywhere but at the gate. By slowing the things down, it gave us more opportunities to get the horse to pay attention to us. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
So that went on, and we wound up getting a little notice. Got a guy from Winter, does the short segments at the race program. Stu Kirschenbaum was the guy's name. He asked if he could come over and see what we were doing. He heard that it was going on. And I said, you can, but there's not much to see because they're quiet now and they're just kind of walking in. He said, well, I'll determine that. And he came there and he did a thing. It was like a 6-minute piece. And I forgot about it. There was nothing really special about it. We had eliminated the buggy whip as a pain tool. You could haze with it and guide with it, but it was no longer a weapon. That was one thing we did, and we just, as I said, slowed the whole process down with the babies, and we got some attention for it. Happened to be the year that Monty Roberts was had published, and it was bestseller. Man Who Listens to the Horses. We get up to Saratoga. He was up there signing books, and he stopped over at the last race in his car. And as we're piling out of the 7/8 chute, he introduced himself, and he said, "I think we have something in common. If you can ever get a chance to come out to my farm in Solvang, I'd love for you to do that. And I've got a problem horse out there now, in fact, if you could come." And I said, "Oh, thanks." And I shook his hand. I said, "Well, that'll never happen." And when like a week or two later, I got a letter from the Arizona the college for the symposium on racing, asking if I would be on a panel about public perceptions of horses. Monty Roberts is going to be on the panel, and Tom Durkin was going to be the MC. And so I agreed to do. This is a big thing for me. I'm not a public speaker, and but I talked to Tom I've been struggling like this all the time. Dr. Hill, Ted Hill.
Right.
And he said, "You've got to do this." He said, "This is good for your career." And so I did it. And then at that thing, Monty invited me to fly out from there to his farm. And I spent just a little over a week out there with him, and he was schooling this horse. And all of a sudden, he wasn't teaching me, but just by watching him work with the horse, I could see what he was doing, creating movement, and the horse was connecting to him. And I went home excited about that. So I went online and started looking other names up, and the next name that came up was Pat Pirelli.
Right.
I wrote to his people. Karen Scholl, the president for it, got in touch with Pat, and it turns out that Pat was looking to make inroads in the racing industry. So he invited me out to his place. He had the International Racing Savvy thing. I went out there with that. While I was there, there was a VIP thing for high-end people interested. They had 10 people were allowed to join it. It was $10,000 a person. It was for a week, but you had Pat Pirelli from morning till dark. And he said, "I got an opening in there. I'll comp you into it." So once it's these doors that kept opening up, and you could take a shot and take it, or duck it and have a casual life and with what you know. But it was seeming to me that was the right thing to do each time because they all had some information, and that Pirelli turned out to be the greatest. There are people who don't like him because he's very flamboyant and jokey when he's working with the horses, but there's no better horseman that you'll ever find than the man. He's amazing what he can do. And so I followed him and went out to stayed at his place for an extended period of time. And by the next summer, I'll cut this short. But Monty invited me to go to a place in Topsfield, Massachusetts, where he was doing a clinic. I took my son up there. Happened to be the day that we were drawing for the Belmont Stakes, so we got off, headed up there. He schools this horse that was a 14-year-old mare who they never could get in a trailer without getting her so stoned that her knees were buckling. So he goes through this piece while he's it's about 2,000 people there, and he's got us in the VIP seating right up against the cage, the round pen, and they head back to a trailer in there. He's working with this horse with a long lead on, and he's talking to the people, and he's a gifted talker. He talks for about 15 minutes, and he says, okay, now does anybody have a watch? The guy that offered his watch. He said, well, just tell me how long it takes to get this mare in the van. And I had noticed that while he was moving her, she was difficult to move to begin with, but sort of within a few minutes, she was looking at him and following him. And I'm thinking, how's he going to get anything done here? There's 2,000 people up there distracting him. She's never done this before. This is crazy. And he says, okay, now I'm going to turn around and you start your watch. And he does. And Monty turns and walks at a fast pace, almost a jog. There was a step up trailer, by the way. He jumps up in the back, but the filly runs up and jumps up alongside him, turns around. Bonnie turns around, the filly hangs her head over his shoulder. It was the damnedest thing I've ever seen. And so everybody's going to come. He said, no, wait a second. So he says, he leaves the mare there, unhooks his rope. He walks back to the other side. He said, now, when I tip my hat, you can applaud. And he does this. He tips his hat, and the mare jumps out of the van and runs over and hung her head over his shoulder. And you couldn't, it was like having a dog, It's so amazing. And I was thinking how he got this done. Then afterward, I realized he set himself up for a win. The trailer was in the right place. It was the exit. The crowd was scary, and the horse needed help. And it's a herd animal. He needed help. Monty did something that horses do to each other, moving the horse back and forth. And as you do that, you develop lightness. That it takes less of your movement for the horse to realize what you're going to ask for next. So while he was doing it, and it happens to me all the time now, I can do it sometimes in a minute or two, sometimes it's 15 minutes, but the horse starts rocking with you, and it looks like you're dancing. And I would tease riders sometimes. I say, okay, now take a piece of mane, and I would, after having it set up like that going into the gate, I'd sort of jog backwards, and the horse would jog in, and I'd reverse direction. The horse would turn around, and the rider would go, whoa, because for a 1,000-pound animal, they're amazingly light on their feet.
Were there some riders that were in sync with your philosophy? They just had the touch, and you didn't.
Definitely.
Name some of those riders that just come to mind.
You know who they are: Pat Day, Julie Crone. We over the years, Shoemaker. They had hands, and the hands was teaching with lightness. You do what you have to do, but as soon as you get what you want, you open your hands. So the horses respond to that release.
That's what made those riders. They had such a great sense of timing, but it's their hands, their balance.
Oh, it's all that. It's all that. It's a calmness in your body too. I mean, that's one of the things we teach in the starting gate. Is that I'll watch a rider coming up, and they're all like this, and I'll say, "Well, drop shoulders, take a deep breath, take your feet out of the stirrup if you want, and just walk in." They said, "You've got plenty of." This goes into the tie it on thing. You've got plenty of time. I'm going to let you know everything that's going on in there. And I'll give you a heads up. Everybody's going to have the same break. Nobody's leaving before the doors open. And but that process helped to sync the start to where the horses are jig-jagging. They relax because they realize the riders know that nothing's going on. The sequence of events is broken. The horse learns the sequence of events that when they go into the gate to anticipate the start.
So you're on the starter stand.
Yeah.
It's a 12-horse field.
Mm-hmm.
From your vantage point, you know when to push that button? Is someone communicating? Because you have guys in each of every stall, but it's a sense, it's a feel you have, right?
It is, and you
And what
get
are
to
you
when you
looking, what are you
handle
looking at? Like what, you know, before you press that button, what's your eyesight on?
it's sort of a pan. You see movement in general, and you'll keep looking back and forth, and you might be instructing somebody to go change places or something to do so. There were times in my later years where I would have a horse backed out of the gate if I thought it was explosive. I used to walk along the front of the gate to where we were sitting this close to the rider, the horse's nose, and you can see in the horse's eye how they were feeling, what was going on. We used to call it melting down. And I'd call some over and say, back this horse out, we'll go 2 more horses and you put him back in. And it did 2 things. When you back that horse out, everybody else said, Duncan's back the horse out. It's going to be a little while. And they'd sit and they'd relax and everybody settles. And then you have the horse come back in and have the outside horse go in. It's the way you'd like it to do. The out horse go in, outside horse go in. And as I said, it synchronizes the start. And then you just say, get tied on, to give them enough time to do this, but they're all doing it at the same time. So,
Did you take notes of horses' behavior, like especially the 2-year-olds, the babies?
Books of it, yeah.
Books. So you kind of knew, you would document a lot of the
You have to,
behavior.
because a lot of times you don't handle every horse yourself, or you weren't then we had like 3 locations for schooling. I might not see 2/3 of the horse.
So you had your staff, which were the gate crew,
Yeah,
and would you meet with them, call a meeting every so often?
I
Or how would you hire these guys? They came from other gate crews at different racetracks, and
most of them came from the backstretch. It's one of those things though that you don't really know when you're going to need one, and when you do, you're hustling to find somebody that could work. We've made some bad choices over the years, and we've had some very good choices. Uh, and you're almost better off them not having an opinion about how to handle the horses, because I had to unlearn so much of what I knew to do it the new way.
right.
It was totally different
And
than
you changed that whole profession. I mean,
I learned it
'cause
from somebody. I didn't
you learned it, but you
Yeah.
implemented it.
Yes, yeah.
Is it carried over to today, do you think? I mean,
I-
there've been other starters since you?
Yeah, I say that it's an evolution and not a revolution. It doesn't happen quickly, but I hear from other starters on Facebook. Somebody will see something I've done with a horse, and somebody will write in and say, "Oh, my husband worked at the gate. He looks to you so fondly, and I do too. I got worked in Belmont Park, and we love the way you do the horses." And so that you can see tidbits of it happening around the East Coast at least, and it's slower than I want it to happen, because I know in the day when I followed home from Monty's thing that day, my son was with me, and the first 2 horses came up. We were in there moving them around, and one of the other guys shows up finally. I said, "Look, watch this," and they're looking at you like, "Well, if you'd have gotten the buggy whip out, he'd have been in there by now." I thought, oh man, it was because it feels so good in your hands, Wiz, when it's an emotional thing.
Yeah.
It's such an intimacy. It's the only way to describe it. The
Right.
horse's eye changes, the head drops. All of a sudden they have a great play drive and a curiosity. The horse's head drops. You can be loving them up and needing them. The reward for them is comfort and safety at that point in time. And that's all you have to give them. And the beauty of this thing is that it lasts forever. It lasts forever. It's not like, oh, you fixed them and oh, he ran again, so now we got to fix it again. You might do a maintenance visit, but it stays. Greatest. Do I have a minute for another
Go
example?
ahead. Go ahead. For sure.
My son had been with us then. He was 17. Uh, there was a horse that showed up at Saratoga about the same time. The horse was already in Saratoga. We showed up at Saratoga to start schooling. Fred Lewis, who was one of the great hands we ever had on starting gate, told me about this horse that the guy had. He didn't intend to run him in New York. He was taking him either to Finger Lakes or to Suffolk. He said she's a little filly, about 14 hands. You think she's fine, and all of a sudden she just blows, and it could be out toward the front of the gate or into the back of the gate. She said, and you just can't trust her. And he said, Freddie had a good eye. He said, but you never see it coming. Normally, I described a meltdown. Normally, you'll see signs if she's getting ready to lose it. And he said, so you got to really be careful. So David and I had been doing this enough now. We were still novices, but we had done enough of it now that we thought we could help. So we just went ahead and schooled her. And now my guys who are against it, he's going to get his son killed with that horse. Is just what's going on there. And and the only good news I knew was that, you know, first of all, one of the things I learned was with that type of horse, you never close the back doors on them until you know they're in there they're making the choice to stay in there. A lot of horses will go in, it's called advance and retreat. They'll stick their head in and they'll back out and look around and maybe stick their head in again, stay a little longer. And that's their mind process, learning to adapt to some new situation. So we did that with her. We had weeks to do it, and we knew she wasn't going to run there. It, some weeks passed, and he started to try to enter the horse. I don't know where it was. That's probably Finger Lakes. Couldn't get a race, so he takes a shot and he puts her in a New York bred horse, going 7/8 of a mile at Saratoga, open maidens. You know, his horse. He's just. Do you remember Shrimpy in the comics? That's what it looked like. So my son, I give the horse to my son. She draws post 2, 8 or 10 horses in the field. We're loading the race, and I'm standing right there where I always do, right with him in my head praying. Nothing happens to my son. But I knew it was all right. And the filly was showing the right things. Her head was down. And he's waiting on the ground. I said, stay there, Dave, stay there. There's a lot of horses out. Just stay there. Excuse me, the horse next to him goes in. They close the doors on her. The guy gets up. The filly blows upside down. Hung the saddle up on the back door so she didn't get all the way down. This is the company next to us, not ours.
Right.
She's thrashing about trying to get up. She was able to get herself up, stand upright, and the whole time she's doing this, this little filly had her head dropped right in my son's chest. She just put her head in his chest, just waiting for him to, you know, that was her safety place. And it took quite a while to get her back up on her feet, and then we had to reload the field, and she stayed in the whole time. He got up, the field got up, she broke with the leaders and finished 4th, picked up a check. Of course, my guys are all saying, "Oh, wow, you know that happened because of this and that." You know, everybody would make it. To this day, they do it, Tom. You know, making excuses. Oh, well, yeah, well, you took a little time with more. Oh, where'd you get that rope halter? I need to get myself one of those. It was always about the equipment or the sky was bright or
Was there ever a
it's a
gate
hard sell.
Was there ever a gate malfunction where
Oh,
you
yeah.
press the button and
Yeah.
the gate didn't open up,
Well,
or stall?
one drags a stall, you know, stall door drags doesn't open as fast as the others.
Right, and that's when obviously there's an inquiry and they
Yeah.
call it a not declared
Yeah.
either a non-race or you get your money back on that horse.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I've had it where we thought we saw it, and I asked the stewards to take a look at it, and they can slow it down and see that it's the case.
And I would imagine that because the start is so crucial to the outcome of the race, that leaving the gate, you see, you know, horses banging each other,
Yeah.
you know, horses checking. You can't really post an inquiry. It's hard to post an inquiry at the start of the race,
Yeah.
you know. Right? I mean,
You're absolutely right. In fact, there's a natural response by the horses. If one horse breaks slow, they fill that spot into space the field out so that they get equal as much distance as they can have between the.
In 2006, didn't you go to Kentucky and do the Derbs? Weren't you the
Yeah.
starter in the Derby and the Oaks that year?
Yeah.
The year that Barbaro, and I just
Yeah.
remember because Barbaro was one of my
We'll just get some information.
Barbaro is one of my favorite horses of all time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I remember you being the starter
Yes.
for that, and that was two
That was a
gates and
thrill.
auxiliary. That had to
Yeah.
be one of your great thrills.
Absolutely was, yeah. And what I keep telling everybody about it too was, I mean, it's obviously such an honor to start the Derby, but I went down there knowing that the crew would be afraid. Why is this guy here? Is he trying to get our job? A guy named Scott Jordan had been working on the
Scott
gate.
Jordan was the gate, right?
He still is. He I lost my train of thought again. He talked to his guys. I mean, I talked to him on the phone, and you know, I told him, "Look, you realize why they're doing this?" He said, "Yeah, I understand. Yeah, you know, I've just got my job 2 weeks. I go, if I take the start and some horse stumbles, they're going to say, well, the guy that just started didn't know his job. He's only there 2 weeks." So it was sensible for them. I was retired and I had 30 years more working on the starting gate, and so I
That
was
had to be a
invited.
thrill for you.
It was when I said yeah, I said yeah, and then I said, oh shit, what did I just do?
So,
It's good.
so
You know,
as I mentioned, but the reason I knew it because Barbaro was one of my favorite horses.
Yeah.
But you know, I go back to the '60s. Okay, so
I do too.
I would say that the three. So you know, you're watching these 2-year-olds develop, getting, you know, growing. They
Mhm.
become 3-year-olds. You've seen their development
Hmm.
over a course of a year, 2 years, right? And I would say, so I just see it on the racetrack as a professional handicapper, but I would say, and tell me if you kind of agree with me. We've seen a lot of beautiful looking horses, a lot, but a beautiful looking horse that's a great horse. There's a lot of
Mhm.
beautiful looking horses. You know, I have a 10 claimer now that's a beautiful looking filly that couldn't run it,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
at Beulah Park for 5, right? So I mean, but a beautiful looking horse that becomes a great horse, and you kind of know
Mhm.
as a 2-year-old, you got your eyeballs set on this
Yeah.
horse
Yeah.
because it's something special. You don't know what it is
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
And then they run as 2, they're developing into the horse you think
Yeah.
that they will be. But I'd say the 3 horses that I saw develop from the first time they ever started and then became 3-year-olds that were the greatest physical looking horses, and you can see their development, was Ruffian,
Mhm.
Secretariat, obviously, because I was at the Belmont that year, and he looked unbelievable in the paddock.
Yeah.
But the one that stands out in my mind is Seattle Slew in the Jockey Club Gold Cup that year.
It was an amazing race.
Amazing race,
what an animal.
but what an animal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, was
Race
he
good.
one of the greatest that day in the Jockey Club Gold Cup? He looked unbelievable. He looked,
He did. He
and
always had his game face on. He was the kind of horse where you couldn't really tell him what to do. You could kind of move him around and make him comfortable, and he'd follow. He wasn't resistant. But if for some reason you messed with him too much, I mean, the first race he ran in, somebody else had the horse and tried to put tongs on him. He threw the rider, not the rider. He threw gate man and the tongs out of the gate. That's when Bill
Bill
Turner
Turner.
came over to the gate and asked for someone else to handle the horse.
I want to conclude this show because I am a professional handicapper, and I want you to clarify something that all handicappers. I'm asking the right person to answer this question. So we're taping this before opening day. I hope to have it up tomorrow before the opening day races. But there's a race, a 5 furlong New York bred maiden special weight race. And Bruce Levine has a horse. We go back, but Bruce Levine is, you know, one of the long time,
I was
you know,
born with him, yeah.
you know,
My father was as well.
so we go back a long time with him. He's still, you know, here.
He's a good guy.
Yeah. But they bought this horse for $335,000. It's a Bolt d'Oro out of the Saratoga sale. Now it's a New York bred. That's a big price to pay out of a premier sale. This was not in the New York bred sale. It was in the open select sale in Saratoga.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking at the PPs, and the one thing that I saw, and tell me if this is because the 4 out of the 5 last workouts of this horse are from the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
That
mean
sounds horrifying to me, by the way.
now?
That's
I mean, since June. So in about a month, the horse has worked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a month, with 4 being from the gate.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a big negative? Because obviously the horse is not breaking well from the gate, right? And do they tell you who makes the decision to go and work from the gate again?
The reason I work for Todd right now is Todd and I going back
Todd Pletcher.
Todd Pletcher's I schooled a lot of his horses, and his father would come over, and his father would he'd come to Belmont, and his father broke a lot of the horses, and I would get to see his problem horses, and he'd explain it. There were times he didn't, but he'd come up there, and he saw the process that we do now, the calming effects of it. And the fact that we always included it, and the aggressive work, you want to do the minimal amount of it. You want to do just enough to where they're responding. It's probably better for you not to hook your gate works up with the breeze.
Right.
Go across the chute and stop.
But obviously the horse has to work 4 times out of the gate in less than a month.
No,
That
nobody
means
does.
the horse is just something is not right there.
Absolutely. And the key to this thing, and I didn't quite get done with it yet, was remedial schooling. As these horses break from the gate, you can tell they're getting a little excited. Let them come back a day or two. Stand, maybe you'll leave the back doors open. You'll just do friendly things with them. Give them a chance to take a deep breath, break the rhythm up of what happens in the race. Let them know they can be up there, and it can be his choice to be there. And that's something that would take us another hour if I had described to you how the process of fixing a horse mentally. And that's the difference between what we do now than what we do in the past. The past, it was that you have to situation. Now it's a place where you offer choices. You guide them slowly into a comfortable choice. The horse actually feels like he made that choice, and it's been really good since I've been there. You know, that guy's done nothing but scratch me and make me feel good, and I went home. And so it's therapy, and you can break it at different points, but it's key when you're teaching your horse to balance that forward work with comfortable visits to the gate where they can feel confident in the gate and not feel like it's always going to be a stressful situation.
Well, it's an honor to have you on the show. I mean, I wouldn't have named the show. Tom and I would not have named the show after you if we didn't really honor and respect what you have contributed to this game. I mean, and you know, there's a lot there. People in the industry know who you are,
That's very
right?
kind of you.
But
Thank you.
there's a lot of people that don't. And those are the guests that Tom and I want to put on the show because you're the backbone of what you've done is changed. The reason the game is the game in a good way, because there's a lot of bad things about the game, but you have contributed so many good things. And I really, you know, appreciate that. And I know people are going to get who don't know you. They don't know who Bobby Duncan is. And I want people like you, you know, to live on forever. It's like great music, right? We know that Paul Simon is going to live on forever, or Bruce Springsteen. And they, you know, people should know, you know, all the years you spent in this game and what you've done. So, Bobby, it's a real pleasure for you to come on the show. I hope you enjoyed it. I could have spoke for another hour, but the iPad, you know, but the iPad would have run out the battery, and, you know. But thank you so much for making the trip here and doing it.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
We're back, and welcome to our segment, Shipping Out. This is how we'll end each of our shows this week. And we want to remind you that Get Tied On is brought to you by wizardracingsports.com, and we air on the Wizards Thoroughbred Racing channel. So, Michael, let's talk about, it's 40 days, but day one is what everybody is focusing on, and anything that anybody has done to prepare for day one. I want to say thank you and give a salute to the New York Racing Association for drawing the races early and getting the overnights and the PPs to us earlier than ever for the first 3 days. And, you know, there's nothing like 5 days to think about the opening day card. I know what I do to prepare. You know, we know every opening day card is going to have several 2-year-old maiden races and the Schuylerville, and the opening race is generally going to be a 9-furlong race for claimers of some sort. And so you can prepare, at least I prepare I watched every 2-year-old race, the replay of every 2-year race run at Churchill Downs and in New York in preparation for the plethora of juvenile races we're going to see. Some horses were impressive. Many horses were being schooled in races and getting educated, and you know everyone is pointing for a win here at Saratoga. How do you prepare?
Well, first of all, as we get into our later years of
Yes, later
the
years.
attention span is kind of less and less, right?
You know what we retain?
what we retain, and just, just the effort it takes to do a card.
Yeah.
And for me to map out the wagers, I welcome these early draws. And what's great is also the morning line is up earlier.
Yes.
And that makes, I could start my work earlier. And, when I get tired, I can put it aside, come back to it, not have that rush that, having to rush and finish a card when they draw the entries 2 days out, or,
Right.
now, I think the opening day was out Friday.
Right.
So it was 6 days. And, for me, I like to sit with the race, not, go over it like you. We go over it one time, go through the card, go through it a second time. And then, a couple days out, we're ready to start making our picks.
That's right.
Um,
And the other thing is, you also have the extra work of anticipating off the turf, right? We live by 10-day weather forecasts, and with rain in the forecast, yes, you're going to handicap the card at least twice, once for once for turf and once for off the turf, and that sometimes that will double the work.
yeah,
I like I like it. I don't fight it when they come off the turf, because there are some opportunities when races come off the turf.
yeah. I like the idea of doing some preliminary work. Then as we get closer to, a day, 2 days out, you get a much clearer weather picture. You can't do the sheet 6 days out.
No.
Or 5 days out, because the weather is so changeable here. So that's something I like, just sitting with the races and then cracking down, like we're filming this on Monday. I'm going to make my final picks on, Tuesday.
Right.
And that I'll have a clearer picture of the weather. As far as me preparing for the meet, I've watched the races at Gulfstream. I watched the races at Churchill. I think the Churchill horses in general are a little better quality in certain maiden races, maiden claiming races. But, I don't adhere to anything, solid right from the start. I let things come to me.
Mhm.
I want to work the race out, see how it sets up, see the trends early in the meet, so I don't have any hard and steadfast rules.
Let's talk about two factors in field size and quality: Ellis Park and Colonial.
Big fields, Ellis Park and
Yeah.
Cologne, big fields, competitive racing, good quality.
And Colonial Downs, that's all turf, right?
No, I think Colonial Downs has dirt too.
They did add. Okay.
I think they have, dirt.
Used to be all turf.
Yeah, but I think they have dirt as well. We saw in New York just a lot of small fields and short price, unbettable races. It's 40 days. They got to fill races. So I'm hoping that the field size holds up better than it did downstate.
And I'm interested also in the performance of shippers from Ellis Park and Colonial. I think
And Churchill and the Churchill downstate.
What we said last year, though, is that also many shippers, many trainers who used to be solely based at Churchill Downs have New York strength, and so we have a handle on some, if not all of that. They're stable when we've seen them run, and we have some sense of what they're going to do when they ship to Saratoga.
Yeah, and I'll pay attention to the trainers at Kentucky that have had recent success the last couple of years coming to Saratoga, because they prep their horses, or they get their horses ready for this meet. And, I know who those guys are. And, hopefully these trends stay, but you never know. You just never know. That's why I'm pretty flexible I let things play out early in the meet, and it's all about getting into a rhythm and not busting your bankroll early on. I mean, you got to
Uh,
pace yourself.
Well, we'll be talking about that throughout the meet. You know, my good friend Vic Zass once said that to enjoy thoroughbred racing, you actually have to learn to have fun while losing. And you know, because we're all going to non-win. I don't like the term losing. You've heard me say that. I prefer non-win. We're all going to non-win significantly more than we're going to win. And our only hope is that when we win, when we're right, we win right. And so that's all about your handicapping, your bankroll, and your ability to construct tickets so that when you're right, you get paid.
I agree.
No, you agree. That's your
That's what I do.
mantra.
I mean, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of this week's show. We're going to ship out. Remember, Get Tied On is brought to you by wizardracingsports.com, and it's broadcast over the Wizards Thoroughbred Racing channel. Subscribe, like us, and join us.
Thank you. See you soon.
Visit wizardracingsports.com and purchase now. Since 1986, the Wizard has been your source for the best handicapping products for the always challenging Saratoga meet. Wizard selections include analysis and wagering strategies for every race. Wagers are updated after late scratches. The Wizard wagers every day, backing up his opinions with his own money. Visit wizardracingsports.com and purchase now.